Why didn't it work out that way? Why is it that it just worked out in the sense of the Zionists essentially just taking over as much as they wanted?
Well, let's just be clear about who is Jewish and who isn't. Actually, what we've got is a vast number of European Jews. All you need to do is look at the colour of the people's skin to see what's happened. These are the people mostly from the areas around Eastern Europe that have come to Israel. They're not the descendants of the people that used to be there. And with those people has come massive disharmony. You know, I mentioned Northern Ireland earlier, and it's absolutely relevant here because we've seen the British playing these tricks over the years in Northern Ireland too, in the days of the English Civil War and Oliver Cromwell, sending a whole load of people over there to settle and to colonise and to cause massive rifts which have led to many wars over the hundreds of thousands of deaths in Ireland. And actually, if you look back even further, Britain has been responsible for the poisoned children of planet Earth. That is to say, the United States of America, many people now look upon as the biggest problem on the planet, and Israel too. Effectively, a mass genocide which happened 400 years ago of Native Americans, the British instituted, and the same sort of thing has been going on, not so many people dead yet, in the Middle East by the Israelis. I think also the timing of Balfour is very important. Before the end of the First World War, back in 1917, some have even said that deals were done, and I don't think it should even be called the Balfour Declaration, really. It should be called the Walter Rothschild Declaration, because he was one of the major players, a very powerful London banker behind it. And what many have said is that the declaration was used as a way to get the United States into the First World War behind Britain, because there was an impasse in World War I, and there was going to be possibly a peace treaty signed, and at that point the Zionists came along to the British and said, well, you can carry on the war and you can win. We'll get the Americans in on your side. Sign this piece of paper. Then, of course, 50 years ago, we had the Six-Day War in 1967, which many point to as the end of international law. That is to say, the occupied territories which were taken over by the Israelis, there was no even a pretense of sharing the land anymore. They were kicked out of Jerusalem, most of the Arabs, and the Israelis still want to make Jerusalem their capital. And I'll cut to the chase now, because I think what's being planned is something much bigger than this, that we haven't seen it all yet, because there are several steps. First of all, that Palestine is exclusively Jewish. That's what the Zionists really believe, and that they want Jerusalem as their capital. They also want to see the temple rebuilt, that is to say the third temple, and ultimately that's going to mean the demolition of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and potentially as well an apocalyptic war with Islam. Now these, I think, are the most dangerous fundamentalisms we're dealing with in the world today, and that's why we need, I think, international intervention to stop this conflict between the Israelis and the Arabs.
Okay, so Maxine, you know, we can argue about the history, because obviously this is many of the Zionists would refer back to the Old Testament and would bring in religion into this, and we can argue about Old Testament versus Bible versus Quran forever, really. But I want to look at pride here, because Theresa May says she is proud of this. But as you clearly said yourself, Maxine, the Balfour Declaration called for Arabs and Jews ready to live side by side, in a sense, really, where, according to your understanding of it, that they should have each had their own states. It did not work out that way. The Zionists are taking over more and more Arab land as we speak right now, too. We know by the Greater Jerusalem Bill right now that Netanyahu supports will only take over even more land, really. So where does this really leave pride? Why should there be any pride here? This hasn't worked out well at all.
Well, let me first of all correct the image that my colleague in London has portrayed. Israel is more than 50% Sephardic, Mizrahi, meaning Jews who were resident in Arab lands, who were thrown out by the Arab governments the moment the state was declared. There were 850,000 refugees, roughly the same amount as the Palestinians claim. These refugees became working citizens, participants in a living state. They are ordinary citizens. There is a color range in Israel, to refer to the reference to color, that goes from the darkest to the light, from Ethiopians and African Jews who are darker than Ethiopians, through Moroccans and Yemenites, through Jews from Tunisia and Syria, from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Iran, and from Europe as well. And even those Jews in Europe bear many shades. So calling Israel a European white state is the most racist statement that anyone could make. So I'm really surprised that my colleague, unless he's never been to Israel and is simply talking from the top of his hat, if you go to Israel, there is no question about the integration of every point of origin within the general population. There is marriage between people of every background. There is no hesitation for children to be in school together, to be in the army together, to work together, to develop businesses together. So there is a complete opposite in reality in what goes on in Israel today
it's not the
than
case,
in what
is
is
it?
portrayed.
In Netanyahu's cabinet,
now, with regard,
it's not the case,
let me go to...
And in the Likud party, it's not the case. In Netanyahu's cabinet,
now, with regard,
it's not the case,
let me go to...
And in the Likud party, it's not the case.
In Netanyahu's cabinet, of course it is. Excuse me, the Minister of Communications is Ayub Kara. Ayub Kara is a Druze. He's not pale European. And there are members of his cabinet who are Yemenite and from Moroccan. So your statement is completely without base and without merit. Let me refer to the question that you raised about Theresa May's pride. Should this proposal for two states, for two people, be accepted and be acknowledged by the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, there would be two states. However, both states have to be ready to accept the other and not look for an acceptance as an interim state to destruction. If Hamas and Hezbollah state in their own charters that their only purpose, or their major purpose, is the destruction of Israel, you can't establish neighborly, working together,
because we are running out of time, Maxine, I do apologize,
states.
but I do want to get to my other questions.